Welcome to Jakverse, a world where anything is possible. Where star gods clash with mortal heroes and brave worlds stand against a powerful evil. It is a place where magic and science collide and terror and wonder walk hand in hand. It is the place that sits at the center of all creation. It is the Jakverse.
Eons ago, when most of the universe was still young, the great ships of the first civilizations trawled across space for profit, fame, war, or simple exploration.
One of these ships would come across a strange rift deep in the outer reaches of the universe. Inside this rift, an unknown energy was emitting. The ship ventured in and came across a strange sarcophagus floating in the rift. They grabbed the object and took it inside their ship for further study.
The scientists aboard the ship ran tests on the object and found it was made of an unknown substance and was covered in the runes of a language not found in any of their vast data banks. Their tools were ineffective in attempting to open it, but strangest of all was the feeling of dread many said they felt whenever they were near the object.
As the ship traveled with its cargo, more of the crew became disturbed by its presence and started having strange dreams, while others grew more enamored with it. Fights between the two sides broke out. One of the crew members pleaded with the captain to return the object to where they had found it. However, a scientist who had taken quite the obsession with the object convinced the captain they were being superstitious and that they were probably suffering from the radiation effects of the object's signature. The captain ordered the object be put in a special cell where only a small team headed by the scientist would study it under containment procedures.
As they conducted more and more experiments on the object, the nightmares began to grow ever more clearer. What was once mere blurry images became a symphony of horrors and unimaginable power. Many of the crew had to report to sick bay, demanding the doctor prescribe something to keep the nightmares at bay.
But still, the scientist who had convinced the captain to keep the object remained unaffected. What's more, his obsession with the object had grown even stronger along with the others who researched it. Their dreams were filled with images of a being and a haunting song they longed to hear more of. They did not rest save for a scant few hours here and there as they toiled endlessly to unlock the object.
The crew's mental and emotional state grew worse, with some of the crew trying to take their own life rather than keep dreaming the nightmares that came upon them. One crew member was discovered dead near the object, holding a homemade explosive that, if it had gone off, would have destroyed the whole ship. His face was twisted in horror, his hand still clutching the device. The captain decided that the object was becoming too much of a burden. He ordered the crew to begin preparations to leave the object on an abandoned outpost. The scientist once again tried to convince the captain, but he would not hear it this time. The object would be removed from the ship.
As the ship got closer to their destination, the scientist was racked even more by the object's siren call. He wanted, no, he needed to unlock it. One of his fellow researchers came to him speaking excitedly that he had seen the way to translate the runes, that it had come to him in dream. Jealousy creeped into the scientist's heart, and he murdered his fellow man, choking the life out of him and taking the translation. Only one would gain this knowledge, and it would be him. He then went to the captain's quarters, where after a long talk he emerged and informed the crew the captain had changed his mind and that they would stay with the object, and that he was not to be disturbed as he had fallen ill.
The ship drifted for a few days across random space, the captain relaying his orders through a speaker box. They were to loiter till the scientist and his team would unlock the object. The first mate had become increasingly suspicious as he only began to see the scientist and not the others. He was denied access to the captain by the ship doctor, who kept near the scientist. The first mate's dreams were also troubled as he kept seeing creeping darkness and piercing eyes. So vivid were his dreams, he could not sleep but for a few scant hours. He approached the doctor and demanded that he be allowed to see the captain or he would shoot him. The doctor told him it would be no trouble and that the captain wished to speak to him. He followed the doctor to the captain's quarters and stepped inside.
As he entered the captain's room, he could feel a coldness as the captain sat in the dark, his voice sounding off as he spoke to the first mate. The first mate asked him what was going on and how many of the crew seemed missing. The captain assured him that he knew where the crew was and that he in time would know too. The first mate then asked the captain to come forward out of the dark. The captain merely smiled and told him to step closer. The first mate came forward and the captain leaned towards him. What the first mate saw was something so horrifying he passed out from fright.
When the first mate awoke, he found himself deep in the labs of the ship. He was tied up, and all around him he could see the missing crew members. Some were tied up, their flesh cut in a ritualistic fashion, others moved freely about the labs, their eyes glowing like the captain, and they all chanted a strange song. The scientist approached, his eyes glowing, his face no longer resembling anything known to them. He spoke with a voice like steel scraping steel. He told the first mate that soon he would witness the birth of the ruler of this realm, that soon he would have the honor of dying for Lord Omni. The scientist gestured, and one by one the others slit the throats of the tied-up crew, their blood being caught in these large gold basins. They then grabbed the blood and drenched the sarcophagus which was in the middle. Each drop of blood sizzled and went inside. The first mate could only look on helplessly as they began to dance around the sarcophagus, stripping naked and smearing blood all over themselves, chanting ever so loudly. As chanting rose higher and higher, the scientist began to float, his mouth open towards the sky as black tentacles emerged from his mouth. The tentacles were covered in mouths, and they began to speak in a tongue from a universe past. As they spoke, their voices rose louder and louder, till the very walls were shaking, and the sarcophagus began to glow and shake. The tentacles began to lash at the others, biting and tearing at their flesh. Soon they wrapped around them and lifted them up in the air. The tentacles began to pull the people towards the mouth of the scientist as they retreated back into his body. The people never stopped chanting, even as they were swallowed by the giant mouth of the scientist. The scientist's belly was grossly swollen as he floated back down to the floor. He turned to face the first mate, who could only whimper at the evil being before him. The scientist reached and grabbed him, lifting him up high with one hand as he ripped the flesh off his chest. The scientist threw the first mate back like he was nothing but air. He then ate the flesh. As he did that, his stomach shrank violently. The scientist turned back to the sarcophagus and vomited out a slimy black and bloody torrent of slimy beings who crawled all over the sarcophagus, tearing at it with their hands. The object shook as cracks appeared more and more. As they did, the creatures clawed harder and harder. Then with a mighty boom, the sarcophagus broke open. An ooze of blue flesh came out of the object. It twisted and bubbled as it moved around, forming itself, till finally it resembled some monstrous-shaped being. After billions of years, Lord Omni was free once more. The scientist stared at Omni, his mind his own again. He realized in horror what he had done, what he had unleashed. All he could do was whisper no as Omni stretched forth his hand and turned him into a throne. As the scientist was twisted into his new shape, so too was the ship twisted to serve the Vicar of Darkness. When it was done, Omni sat upon his throne, his body shifting and morphing. The universe had no idea that everything had just changed.